The night sky above Los Angeles glittered with a million tiny stars, but the brightest lights were not in the heavens. They came from the blinding flashbulbs of dozens of cameras, exploding like gunfire in the darkness. Lindsay Lohan, barely 20, stumbled out of a nightclub, her mascara smudged, her expression caught somewhere between exhaustion and defiance. The crowd around her, paparazzi, onlookers, hangers-on, closed in like predators circling their prey. Every step she took was illuminated, dissected, and broadcast across the world before she could even catch her breath. It should have been the triumphant stride of a Hollywood darling. Only a few years earlier, Lindsay had been the girl every child adored, the teenager every parent trusted, the actress every studio wanted. She had the red hair, the freckled smile, the kind of effortless charisma that could light up a screen. From The Parent Trap to Mean Girls, she wasn't just a rising star. She was the embodiment of what Disney and Hollywood promised, that innocence and talent could coexist, that dreams could come true. But under the surface, another story was being written, one of suffocating pressure, of relentless cameras, of a child robbed of her childhood. For Lindsay, fame was not a reward, it was a cage. Her adolescence unfolded not in private bedrooms or high school hallways, but in the pages of People magazine, on TMZ's breaking news ticker, in the relentless click of cameras that followed her from the set to the sidewalk. That night outside the nightclub, the cameras didn't just document her, they condemned her. Every photograph was evidence, every headline a public trial. Disney princess gone wrong, teen stars meltdown, Lohan in handcuffs again. The flashbulbs, once a sign of adoration, had become a guillotine slicing her reputation apart, one frame at a time. This is not just the story of a young woman making mistakes. Hollywood has always forgiven men for far worse. This is the story of how the industry manufactures idols only to dismantle them when they grow inconvenient, how the media feasts on the spectacle of collapse, and how a girl who once symbolized hope became the scapegoat for society's hunger for scandal. Lindsay Lohan's downfall wasn't a sudden explosion, it was a slow erosion. It began the moment the world forgot she was still a child. It accelerated each time the tabloids rewarded her humiliation with headlines, and it climaxed in courtrooms, rehab centers, and mugshots that froze her forever in a cycle of shame. Her tragedy forces us to ask, did Lindsay destroy herself, or did we destroy her? Was she a reckless young woman who squandered her gifts, or was she the sacrificial lamb of a Hollywood machine that devours its brightest stars too soon? Because sometimes the flash of a camera is not light at all, it is fire. And Lindsay Lohan learned too late that in Hollywood, fire doesn't keep you warm, it burns you alive. Long before the flashbulbs blinded her, Lindsay Lohan was just a little girl from Long Island, with freckles on her cheeks and a spark in her eyes. Born in 1959 to Dina and Michael Lohan, she entered the world not into peace, but into a family already fractured. Her father's temper and legal troubles created turbulence at home, while her mother, once a dancer, saw in Lindsay's charisma an opportunity to chase the dreams she never realized. By the time most children were learning multiplication tables, Lindsay was already modeling. At 3 years old, she appeared in more than 60 television commercials, selling everything from cereal to clothing. While other kids were playing hopscotch on sidewalks, Lindsay was hitting her mark under hot studio lights, reciting lines, learning to smile on cue. Childhood wasn't lived, it was performed. Her big break came at 11, when Disney cast her in The Parent Trap. It wasn't just a role, it was an introduction to the world. Overnight, Lindsay became the wide-eyed redhead who could melt hearts across continents. Hollywood praised her as a natural talent, but for Lindsay, the success was double-edged. It opened doors to fame and fortune, while simultaneously slamming shut the possibility of an ordinary adolescence. School dances, gone. Carefree summers, replaced by film sets. Friends, hard to keep when your face was on. Every poster in every mall across America. What she gained in attention, she lost in privacy. What she gained in opportunity, she lost in stability. After The Parent Trap, she was quickly pulled deeper into Disney's empire. The machine needed her another young face to replace those who had grown too old, too complicated, too scandalous. The studios saw dollar signs, the public saw a role model. But Lindsay was still just a child. Her life became a balancing act between scripts, cameras, and the fragile boundaries of a teenager trying to grow up while millions watched. By the time she starred in Freaky Friday and Mean Girls, Lindsay was no longer just a child actress, she was a cultural phenomenon. Her movies made hundreds of millions. Her fashion choices became trends. Her freckles and fiery hair made her instantly recognizable. The world called her the next big thing. She was the proof that Disney magic could still manufacture icons. But in the shadows of the spotlight, cracks were forming. Behind her mother's polished smile was the ambition of someone who lived vicariously through her daughter's stardom. Behind her father's appearances were arrests, substance abuse, and violent confrontations. Lindsay's safe place, the family, was anything but safe. She was adored by the world, yet at home she was caught in storms of betrayal and chaos. This combination was a time bomb. A girl celebrated as flawless on screen, but crumbling under the weight of expectations off-screen. And when she finally stumbled into her teenage years, she didn't stumble into normality. She stumbled straight into the lion's den of Hollywood. The child who never got to be a child was already being groomed for a crown she didn't ask to wear. By the early high-teens, Lindsay Lohan was no longer simply the promising child star from The Parent Trap. She had become the face of a new era of teen stardom. With the release of Freaky Friday and Hangin' Lerba, a quirky comedy where she played both the rebellious daughter and the responsible mother in a body-swap twist, Lindsay proved she could carry a film on her own. The movie grossed over $160 million worldwide, transforming her from Disney's darling into a bankable Hollywood lead. But it was Mean Girls in Hangin' Lerba that sealed her legacy. Written by Tina Fey, the high school satire exploded into a cultural touchstone, with Lindsay at its center as Cady Heron, the outsider who becomes Queen Bee. The role captured the contradictions of her own life: innocent yet corrupted, admired yet manipulated, celebrated yet misunderstood. Suddenly, Lindsay wasn't just an actress, she was the voice of a generation of teenagers who recognized themselves in her transformation. Magazines crowned her Hollywood's It Girl. She graced red carpets draped in designer gowns, appeared on the covers of Vanity Fair and Rolling Stone, and signed multi-million-dollar record deals to release pop albums that topped the charts. Her freckles, once a symbol of childishness, became an emblem of individuality. Her flame-red hair, her smoky voice, her effortless magnetism, every detail of her being was amplified and sold to the world. Everywhere Lindsay went, cameras followed. Fashion brands paid her fortunes to wear their clothes. Paparazzi scrambled to catch her every move, knowing one candid shot could fetch thousands of dollars. Hollywood had discovered its golden goose, and the public couldn't get enough of her. But behind the glossy facade was a truth more fragile than her carefully staged images. Lindsay was still a teenager, navigating heartbreaks, friendships, and insecurities in front of a ravenous audience. She was thrust into adult situations without the emotional scaffolding to handle them. While her peers experimented with mistakes in private, Lindsay's every slip was magnified under the world's microscope. Still, in those fleeting years, she held Hollywood in the palm of her hand. She could sing, she could act, she could charm an audience in ways few stars of her generation could. The industry declared her the heir to icons like Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock. Disney had given her the wings, and now she was soaring above the clouds. Yet the higher she rose, the thinner the air became. Each film contract, each photo shoot, each tour date layered more weight on her already fragile shoulders. Fame was intoxicating, but also poisonous. What seemed like an endless ascent was, in truth, the beginning of a dangerous descent. Because for Lindsay Lohan, the peak wasn't just the height of glory, it was the edge of a cliff. The applause that once followed Lindsay Lohan everywhere began to change its rhythm. It wasn't cheers echoing from fans outside movie premieres anymore. It was the metallic click of camera shutters at police stations, the low murmur of gossip columnists, the relentless hammering of headlines that no longer celebrated her talent but announced her troubles. The first cracks appeared in Hangin' Lerba when Lindsay was barely 19. Rumors about her partying began to overshadow her acting. Paparazzi photos showed her stumbling out of clubs at dawn, her youthful glow now accompanied by glazed eyes and the wobble of someone intoxicated. At first, the public dismissed it. After all, wasn't this just what young Hollywood did? But Lindsay wasn't just any young star. She was the face of Disney, the supposed role model for millions of teenagers. Every misstep felt amplified, every rumor magnified. In May, Hangin' Lerba, the illusion shattered completely. Lindsay was arrested for the first time after crashing her Mercedes into a hedge in Beverly Hills. Police found cocaine in her car. Days later, she entered rehab, a move meant to show responsibility, but only 2 months later, she was arrested again, this time for driving under the influence and possession of narcotics. The headlines were merciless. From mean girl to real criminal, mugshots of the once golden actress were plastered across every tabloid cover, replacing the film stills and glamorous red carpet poses that had defined her image. The cycle had begun. Arrest, rehab, court appearance, brief comeback attempt, another arrest, another rehab. Lindsay became less of a person and more of a spectacle. Paparazzi staked out her every move, hoping for the next messy photograph. TMZ, Perez Hilton, and every gossip outlet thrived on her downfall. A candid shot of Lindsay with a cigarette in hand, looking frail and lost, could circulate worldwide within hours, dissected by strangers who felt entitled to pass judgment on her life. Hollywood turned its back. Insurance companies refused to cover her on sets, deeming her unreliable. Directors who once fought to cast her now refused to take the risk. She lost film roles, endorsement deals, and the credibility she had built during her peak. By the late hang-ins, Lindsay wasn't starring in blockbuster comedies anymore. She was a punchline in late-night monologues. But beneath the surface of scandal and spectacle was something more tragic. A young woman in free fall, desperately searching for stability. Her family, instead of anchoring her, became part of the storm. Her parents' bitter feuds played out publicly, with her father giving interviews about her addiction while her mother defended her recklessness. Hollywood had stolen her childhood, and now her home life offered no safe harbor. Lindsay was left adrift, surrounded by sycophants, opportunists, and paparazzi eager to profit from her unraveling. And then there were the nights that defined her decline. Nights when she was photographed barefoot on the streets of Los Angeles, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Nights when police officers pulled her out of cars, smelling of alcohol, with cocaine hidden in the console. Nights when her mugshot would appear in the morning papers, her wide eyes staring blankly, as if she herself couldn't believe how far she had fallen. In Hangin-le-Mui, she stood before a judge, trembling as she was sentenced to jail time for violating probation. Cameras recorded her every expression, and the footage was replayed endlessly on television. The girl who had once made the world laugh in Mean Girls now made the world shake their heads in pity or ridicule. She was no longer Lindsay Lohan. The actress, she was Lindsay Lohan, the disaster. Yet in every image, every headline, there was an unsettling truth. She was still so young. At an age when most people are just beginning to navigate adulthood, Lindsay had already lived a lifetime of triumph and tragedy. The paparazzi framed her as reckless, irresponsible, and broken. But few stopped to ask, what happens when a child is forced to grow up in a fishbowl, denied privacy, burdened with impossible expectations, and hunted by cameras that never sleep? The flashbulbs, once symbols of her rising star, had turned deadly. They no longer celebrated her, they consumed her. Every burst of light captured not her glory, but her collapse. The very machine that had elevated her now tore her apart piece by piece. And yet, even in the depths of her downfall, Lindsay remained compelling. The world couldn't look away. Each scandal became an episode in an endless series. Each mugshot another season of a show that no one could stop watching. She was no longer an actress on screen. She had become the lead character in her own real-life tragedy, broadcast in real time to millions. Hollywood has always thrived on dualities, the rise and the fall, the angel and the sinner, the dream and the nightmare. For Lindsay Lohan, those dualities collided with merciless force. She wasn't just a fallen star, she was a cautionary tale, a spectacle, a mirror reflecting the darkest hunger of fame itself. And somewhere beneath the noise of scandal and judgment, the little girl from Long Island was still there, lost, unheard, suffocated by the firestorm of attention. The world had demanded a princess. When she faltered, it demanded a villain. And Lindsay, unable to escape either role, was devoured by both, because in Hollywood, the climb to the top is dazzling, but the fall, the fall is what they come to watch. By the time the Hangin-le-Muis arrived, Lindsay Lohan's name had become shorthand for scandal. What once signified promise and charisma now conjured images of police sirens, courtroom appearances, and tabloid covers screaming, "Troubled star." The transformation was devastating. not only for Lindsay but for the millions who had once believed she would be the next great actress of her generation. Her substance abuse deepened. Reports described alcohol as her constant companion, with cocaine, prescription pills, and occasional heroin use whispered about in tabloids. Friends and enablers came and went, many profiting from her chaos, selling stories, or capturing incriminating photos. The cycle of addiction and relapse spun endlessly, pulling her deeper into a spiral she seemed unable to escape. Rehab became a revolving door. In total, Lindsay would check into rehabilitation facilities at least 6 times. Some stays lasted only days before she walked out. Others stretched for months, offering brief glimmers of hope. Each time, the press covered her recovery as a spectacle, turning her most private battles into public entertainment. The world watched Lindsay fight her demons in real time, forgetting that addiction is not cured by headlines, but by patience, compassion, and stability, things Hollywood rarely offers. Her reputation in the industry suffered irreversible damage. Directors who once praised her as a natural talent now whispered about her unreliability. Producers avoided her, citing insurance risks. Scripts dried up. Projects that might have reignited her career fell through when studios refused to gamble on her. Lindsay, once a box office darling, was now considered toxic. Her high comeback attempt, starring in the TV movie Liz, Dick, was meant to reintroduce her as a serious actress. Playing Elizabeth Taylor should have been a chance to prove her resilience. Instead, the film was panned by critics, mocked for its low production quality, and Lindsay's inconsistent performance. Headlines didn't celebrate her return, they ridiculed it. Meanwhile, her personal life remained chaotic. Relationships with lovers and friends dissolved in waves of betrayal and mistrust. Financial troubles mounted. Unpaid taxes, lawsuits, and extravagant spending drained her fortune. By High, it was reported that she owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to the IRS. The girl who once graced the covers of fashion magazines now struggled to pay her bills. Her legal troubles escalated. Between Bay and Muiba, Lindsay was arrested multiple times for charges ranging from DUI to theft. Each arrest added another mugshot to the gallery of her downfall, another reminder that the actress who had once been Hollywood's brightest hope was now entangled in its darkest traps. In one infamous case, she was accused of shoplifting a necklace worth kai-hai, namcham. The trial was broadcast across the world, reducing her to a caricature of disgrace. But beneath the spectacle, Lindsay never stopped yearning for redemption. She spoke often of her desire to rebuild her career, to be taken seriously again. She gave interviews insisting she was sober, insisting she was focused, insisting she had changed. Sometimes the sincerity in her voice was undeniable. Other times, her declarations seemed fragile, like someone trying to convince herself as much as the world. There were fleeting moments when Lindsay seemed poised to reclaim her place. Guest appearances on shows like Saturday Night Live offered reminders of her wit and charm. A role in Paul Schrader's The Canyons in Muiba, though controversial, suggested she was still willing to take risks as an actress. She even moved abroad for periods, retreating to Europe and the Middle East, seeking distance from Hollywood's relentless spotlight. Yet the shadow of her past followed everywhere. Paparazzi stalked her in London, in Mykonos, in Dubai. The internet immortalized her missteps, making her a constant subject of memes and online ridicule. Every effort to move forward was met with reminders of the past she could not escape. Her body bore the evidence of her struggles. Once glowing with youth, Lindsay appeared thinner, frailer, her features sharpened by stress and substance abuse. The transformation shocked those who remembered her as the vibrant star of Mean Girls. She was living proof of what fame, addiction, and exploitation could do to someone who entered the spotlight too young. And yet, despite everything, Lindsay refused to disappear completely. Unlike other fallen stars who retreated into obscurity, she kept fighting for relevance. In Muibon, she starred in a West End production of Speed the Plough, seeking legitimacy on the London stage. The reviews were mixed, but the attempt itself spoke volumes. She wasn't willing to give up. The consequences of her choices and the choices forced upon her were undeniable. Addiction had scarred her, the justice system had branded her, and the media had crucified her. Her reputation, once spotless, now bore the weight of scandal. She had gone from being America's sweetheart to one of its most infamous cautionary tales. But Lindsay Lohan's story is not one of simple downfall, it is one of survival. Despite every arrest, every relapse, every headline designed to humiliate her, she endured. She never vanished. She never surrendered entirely to the abyss that claimed so many before her. The consequences of her youth were catastrophic, but the resilience buried within her, the stubborn refusal to be erased, would shape the next chapter of her life. Because even in the ruins of a broken reputation, there remained the possibility of redemption, and Lindsay Lohan, no matter how battered by the flashbulbs, still held on to the faintest hope that her story wasn't over. Lindsay Lohan's story refuses to fit neatly into the mold of cautionary tale. For every headline that painted her as reckless, there is another truth lurking beneath. A child pushed into the spotlight before she could understand its dangers. A teenager robbed of privacy, an adult punished for trying to grow up under the world's gaze. Her legacy is complex. On one hand, she symbolizes the archetype of the fallen star, the Disney princess who became Hollywood's scandal magnet. Her name sits alongside Britney Spears, Amanda Bynes, and other young women whose breakdowns were turned into public entertainment. The images of her arrests, her exhausted appearances outside clubs, and her tearful court hearings remain etched in pop culture. For many, Lindsay is the ultimate warning of what happens when fame devours youth. Yet, on the other hand, she is a survivor. Despite the humiliations, the addictions, and the years when her name was synonymous with disaster, Lindsay never disappeared. She has continued to seek new beginnings, whether on stage in London, on reality television, or in small roles that kept her tethered to the industry that betrayed her. In Hangin Le Haimui Hai, she even returned in a Netflix holiday film, Falling for Christmas, a reminder that beneath the chaos still lives the actress who once lit up the screen. Her survival, however fragile, sparks a question that lingers over her legacy. Was she the architect of her own collapse, or was she the victim of an industry built to destroy? Certainly, her choices, drinking, drugs, reckless driving, played a role. But those choices were made within a system that exploited her, rewarded her for her innocence, and then punished her when she inevitably stumbled. Perhaps her greatest tragedy is not that she fell, but that she fell in front of an audience that refused to look away. Lindsay's life became a mirror for society's obsession with rise and ruin, for our hunger to watch idols burn. The flashbulbs didn't just illuminate her, they consumed her. And so Lindsay Lohan remains suspended between two worlds, the talented actress who once embodied hope, and the troubled woman whose struggles became a public circus. Her story is both a warning and a testament, both a wound and a scar. In the end, the question is not just what Lindsay Lohan did to herself, but what we, Hollywood, the media, the public, did to her. Because when the lights fade and the cameras stop clicking, the girl with freckles and fire-red hair is still there, waiting for the world to remember not the scandals, but the talent that once made her unforgettable. Her legacy is unfinished, and perhaps that is the only honest way to tell her story.